Welcome, everybody, to our session today on mastering the protocol description. We're going to go kind of step through all of the different sections of the protocol description, talking about the purpose of the tab itself, of what you would do, fill in here, and then kind of just look at various tools and functions that happen to occur on those different sections. Yeah, let's just dive right in here. I guess I'll start maybe real quick in ARM. We'll kind of go back and forth, trying to summarize some of the functionality in PowerPoint slides and maybe talk with our hands a little bit of the software itself. So of course, we're talking about the protocol description section. So we're really focused on protocols and what would apply here in planning out your trials. And so the protocol description has a lot of different sections in it to organize all of the various components, metadata, things like that, that are related to your experiment. Like I said, we'll just go kind of tab by tab here through each section, talking about the things that we would find here. And so the first section is our trial establishment guidelines. So has a variety of due dates and overall details for the trials that will be planned, as well as design information. Some of these fields in the site and design are a little different. If you go to edit the value, or if you click on the validation list, things like your plot size, your study design, they actually are controlled by the settings. So this is where you really define the plot size, the number of replicates, your study design. Those are all in the protocol settings. And so the values here in the protocol description are synced up. They are the same value. So if you change one, the other one will change. And so this is really just a way to have it show up on a report. It's in the section there describing what the experiment is planned to be. But that's why when you actually go to change that, it'll actually bring you into the settings, because that's where all of the logic goes, especially with the study design, and changing the different aspects of the design should be done here on this screen. So not too many fields are like that. Most of them, I think, kind of are just in this one section of site and design. Moving down is kind of one of our main features, main focuses today, is this trial location table. And so let me introduce it here with the PowerPoint. Pretty big function overall. I can't remember if we even referenced it a little bit in our beginner's certification, even as it's a pretty big part of planning out your experiment. The idea here is that we have a table where we can put in specific information for the trials that are going to be performed as part of this protocol. So you can have a row, add a row for into this table for every trial itself, or kind of depending on how you're organized, how the trials are distributed, it could be that you create a row for each individual that will be in charge of organizing trials. Kind of two different ways to do it. And you can see on the screen here, we have this column called responsible, and there's also a column for number of trials. So depending on which angle you take, if you are kind of just going to list out all of my study directors, or all of the people who I'm going to pass this protocol on to, and they may be contracting multiple trials out, but they're in charge of figuring that out and collecting the data. This allows me to put down their information and assign them how many trials in total. Or a different way to look at it would be just, you can fill in trial IDs, and each one is unique. Every single trial that's going to be created from this protocol will be in this table. And so then, of course, number of trials would presumably always be 1 in that case. So a lot of flexibility with this table. Hopefully, there's quite a few different fields. Some of them are hidden by default, but you can expand upon just depending on how in detailed you'd want to go. And hopefully it kind of supports a wide variety of different ways that groups set up and organize their trials as it relates to your protocol, of course. So the goal is obviously just to plan them out, list them out here. It also kind of helps as a Kickstarter for the trials themselves, that it will populate, most of these columns will populate in the trial that information. So let me go back to ARM. Obviously, the trial ID, that will then be what's used in the header of the trial. That's very important in most cases to get that identifier that as the sponsor I would have planned or I've got in my other system as the identifier for that trial that I really want locked in. But even things like the country, the region, the trial year, if I put in contact details like the investigator or the cooperator, those will go into the contacts section of that trial. So a lot of information here. If I know it, if I want to, it makes for a real nice summary of organizing the information, but it also is going to help in the trial to start to fill out some of those details in the trial file. Do have a handout, just a PDF that goes into even more detail on some of these aspects. I don't want to get too bogged down with this function, but it is really valuable. And like I said, you can kind of just slowly get deeper and deeper into some of the different functions and capabilities with this table. So that's just a PDF out on our website. I will include that when we email out the recording. I'll also include that link for your reference. And so I'll go through this aspect pretty quick as we do have a nice explanation and a few examples of this in that PDF. So I'll try not to belabor the point here, but one function within this trial location table, which is relatively new, I think we added it maybe a year and a half ago now, is the ability to limit who can see the information in this table. It's one of the downsides to filling in this table with all of the different trials is then if I send this protocol to my trialists, they get to see who I'm working with, who else is working on this trial, which, maybe it isn't necessarily confidential, but it might not also be like the best thing just to be advertising. Oh, wait, how come so-and-so got 3 trials and my group only got 1? Or, just things like that can come up that just really isn't necessary to know. So we added these fields highlighted in yellow to be able to assign and link these trials to an actual ARM license, or technically really assign it to an ARM company. And so you can fill in either the GDM ID, which is like a 6-letter code that every ARM license is given, or their company ID. So again, in our system, in the license database that we have, each unique company has an ID, an identifier as well to keep them separate, of course. So you can fill in either the single license identifier or the whole company identifier. Either one, if you fill in, then when someone else opens that protocol, that is used to filter the table. So then I've got this screenshot down below that if somebody from company 1, COMP1, this made up company here that has an ID of 12, if somebody from that company is sent this protocol and they open it, they will see only these two rows. They won't see the second company or the third or the fourth. They won't see anything that has been linked to a company that is not theirs. So now that trial list will only see the information that is assigned to them, that matters to them. They won't see anything extra. So hopefully that just encourages use of this table, makes it a little easier to want to adopt this functionality, because now I don't have to worry about sharing a little more information than I'm comfortable with about the experiment. And so as far as that GDM ID or that company ID, you can obtain those from your contractors. Each contractor just has to go into their ARM, and on their profile section, there's a button to send license details. So when that person's logged in, it'll list their login name, their company, and most critically in this case is that GDM ID code for the individual and that company number. And there's a button that'll just generate an email with all that information, so that way you have the company ID or that user identifier. And if I go to ARM here, those fields are hidden by default. So let me turn them on real quick. GDM ID, company ID, and name. So there is a validation list associated with the company ID. So that way you could track the companies that you work with. Just for GDPR and privacy's sake, we can't just put the list of all the companies that use ARM in this list and have a master list, of course. So this is just empty. It'll be totally empty by default. For you, I've put in a few of these made up ones myself, just to put something in there. But once you fill them in once, and the company name does not have to match. It's just kind of more for your information to jot down what it's called. All that really matters is that company ID. And if I go back and add that to my list, then it can remember next time I'm contracting with Matt's company, I can put in that ID. The GDM ID doesn't have a list, mostly because those change. GDM ID is just a person at a particular company. Of course, that changes more commonly, and all of this logic is tied back to the company ID anyway. So even if I were to put an individual's GDM ID in one of these tables, the logic surrounding it will be that anyone from their company can see this row in the table, which makes it simple anyway. Like you don't need a bunch of individuals listed in there or anything like that. Okay, so that's the trial location table. Like I said, see that handout for just a little bit slower look. We go through all of the different columns in that table as well, and how to use some of that if it applies. Certainly, it's probably rare that you'd fill in everything in that table very often, but a bunch of different configurations, if you will, of ways to plan out the trials. One more note before we move on to the next section, kind of related to that trial ID. So if I go back to ARM real quickly here, one of the big benefits to using the trial location is really solidifying that trial ID. As a group, if you have an identifier system to keep track of all of the trials that are being, especially ones that are contracted out. If you have troubles with the contractor wanting to change the ID, because maybe they have their own identifier, things like that, causes problems in your system, causes problem in the database, things like that. That trial ID is sometimes a source of contention, trying to keep that thing exactly as you defined it in the first place. So you can kind of gain control over that step one by putting in the trial ID here in the table. And then when the trialist goes to create a trial, this list appears. And so they would choose the one that they want to create. And then when that trial is created, the trial ID is filled in along with whatever other details have been put in. In addition, kind of taking that one step further, then great, I've pre-filled that trial ID to be what I want. You can also use a study rule to then lock that field. So that way, once it's been filled, it can't be changed. So I think in general, this is pretty powerful for information that you're putting in the protocol that should not change. As the sponsor thinking, okay, I'm going to send this to the contractor and eventually I'll get the data back. There's certain information that really is just for me. That's going to just be, I fill it in. There's no reason it would ever change. It's documentation about the experiment, and it won't ever change. There's no expectation that the contractor would need to change it. That's a perfect example for this study rule, where you can lock that information then so it cannot be changed. So I feel like trial ID is like the number one use for this probably. And that's the example I have on the screen. Once that thing is set, I do not want anyone changing it. Might be some other cases, other things that you could think of to lock down. Just know that if you make it a required rule, it will be physically impossible to change that value unless they send the trial back to you to make the change. So the one tip here is just if you can imagine any scenario at all where maybe something happens and that information has to get changed, then it might be wise to make that locked rule just recommended. So that way you don't have an issue. You don't have to have that, hey, I need you to fix this right now type of emergency with the trialist. And if you make it just recommended that you lock the field, then if the trialist is changing that value, there'll be this pop-up. So they'll see this warning. It says, wait a minute, there's a rule. This was supposed to be locked. So you really should not be changing this unless it's necessary. But it really gets them to stop and think about what they're doing. But it does give them the option to make that change. So that would be if you use the recommended type for this rule, just giving a little flexibility, but still having a warning to just make sure have that trialist think before you change this thing. That'd be one way to give yourself a little flexibility for other fields probably that you want to lock. I wouldn't blame anyone at all for locking that trial ID and making it required and just unequivocally it can't change. I think that's a perfectly good use of that rule, but in other cases you might want to give yourself an out. Okay. Have a question here before we move on. Let's see, here we go. Under the site and design, there's this experimental unit. And is it used for calculations or is it just descriptive? So yeah, this field here is just descriptive to explain what your experimental unit is in the study. So there really, I don't believe there's any linkage to, like product calculations or application amounts, things like that. Even though there might be some numeric information, here there's a pod and how large is it? things like that. No, there really isn't any linkage to other calculations in ARM. This is really just a way to, if I'm in an orchard, maybe it doesn't make any sense to call everything a plot, right? In some types of research, this is just a way to um, be more descriptive, define what it is. Maybe in that case, maybe there's smaller trees, maybe there's 4 trees actually make up my plot. So it's a way to describe what your experimental unit is in the study. But that's really all it is, just a descriptive unit. We did make it so this unit is used in other parts of ARM once you fill it in. So something like well, I'm in a protocol, so I won't get to see the plot heading here, where typically ARM says this plot, what is the plot size or whatever, it will update the prompt to use your unit for you. So at least I can help be a little more intuitive for those studies that aren't just out in a field. So good question. All right, moving on to the next tab, the regulations section. Not a whole lot exciting here. I think this should be mostly straightforward. Just a variety of information kind of related to maybe regulatory groups, whether you're working in GLP or GEP, table about previous crops, your Appl guidelines you might be performing, things like that, or permits. Pretty straightforward here, hopefully, on filling in some of that information. Over here on the objectives, pretty short section. There's really only one field here, but it is a rich text field, we call it. And so basically it's like a miniature Word document is what you can think of, all stuffed into this one field. So the key idea is the fact that you have the ability to add formatting to the text. So you could bold things, change the font size, add some color, things like that, in this field, in the information that's here. So kind of the easiest way to do that, especially a lot of times with protocols, you might already have maybe a Word document that somebody has put together that kind of gets all of the plans, or maybe the SOPs that are common instructions for most of the studies of this type, things like that. That's already in Word. The nice thing is you can copy and paste from Word right into a field like this. And all of that formatting will come in nicely. You can create tables and things like that as well, which can be handy. Couple warnings just from the support world that I live in a lot. We do have seen kind of increased questions, usually in the reporting season, where some strange things happen when you try to print a report out to Word or something. Sometimes these fields give us some grief. It really just comes down to how much formatting, what type of formatting, what type of information gets put into these boxes. So pretty powerful that you can have all this formatting. It can come from different areas, but then sometimes there's just little hangups and trip ups of something that's hidden that we don't even see on the screen, causes something weird to act when ARM then has to repackage the information and put it onto a report, that then the report gets sent to Word. You just get things that gets lost in translation. So no reason to not use these fields, I don't think, but just kind of a word of warning. If you have a very large document, just pages and pages of information, or we've seen some correlation with tables that are large or complex, especially if you are like merging cells. If you have a lot of merged cells and things in a big table, that seems to be sometimes ones that cause some problems later on. Again, just with the reporting. ARM handles it pretty nicely when you're using the field and looking. It's only, later on if you try to send a report to Word that translation problem happens. So worst case, if you do have a lot of information, you would want maybe find the highlights to paste in here, and you can always utilize the attachments functionality here at the bottom of the list of windows. You can always attach a document to a protocol. It'll then get attached to each trial as trials are created. That would have the full set of instructions, if you will, or whatever use you might have of what information. That's another way to do that, to just avoid overloading things. All right, moving on to the contacts section. And this has kind of the first example of one of our other main topics here in my slides. So we'll introduce it before we come back. A multi-field favorites list. A little bit of a mouthful, but the idea here is that certain entities, certain components, things you might document in the experiment have kind of multiple components to them. And so all of those different fields, all those different boxes are all related to each other, right? They all really represent one entity. In our case here, we're looking at a contact. Well, that's the one person to contact, but there's all this different information about them. And so we have one list that has all those different fields in it. And that's this multi-field list is really what that would be. So it's somewhat similar to like filling in a treatment, right? Where you would fill in all of the details. Once you've done that, you go back to the main name or identifier field. And when you bring up the list from that field, ARM then has the full list with all those components that it'll check. So once you view that list, it sees, hey, have you used this one before? Have you added it to the list? And with contacts, those lists are totally empty to start with. It'll then ask you, do you want to add what you just filled in to your list? So contacts are a great example. I'll point out a couple of the other spots as we're going along. Application equipment and the new section, that's just the generic equipment as well, are both common examples of this. And just to try to make it real here, I think I did it in my sponsor. Let's do that one here. I didn't save it to my list. So I'll just pretend I'm the sponsor, and I'll just fill in my information really quick. Again, in the field the very first time, I want to put in the information of whatever's necessary. And put in my country, I suppose. That's pretty important. And once I get everything filled in and make sure I fill it in right. No, yep, just the two code there. Then I'll return back to that name. Let me center this on the screen once more. I'm going to go back to that name at the beginning and look at the list. Either the little drop-down button or F9 is the keyboard shortcut button. And that triggers the list that has all of those details for this one contact, specifically the sponsor. So I can add that to my list. So that'll make it easy. The next protocol I'm planning, where I'm the sponsor, I can just fill it in from the list. And each one of these are separate. So the list of cooperators is empty. That I'll have my list of the cooperators that I work with. will be separate from the investigators, separate from the study director. Each one of those are a completely separate list. One small note here, if you have any GDPR concerns, there is a little function here at the very left of that contact panel, the little square box there. You can, there's little tools to like copy the repeating section, remove it. This little eyeball with the line through it is a way to hide this contact. So all of the details, all these different fields, if I want to hide them, so that way that those contact information isn't passed along to the trialist, or the other direction if the trialist is going to put their info but shouldn't send it back to the sponsor or whomever, whoever shouldn't necessarily share that personal information. There's that ability there. Just pressing this button is going to hide all of the contact fields, specifically this sponsor contact, and you can decide to hide it from everyone except me or everyone that's not in my company. And what that does is it adds 19 study rules. So kind of one of the reasons for the shortcut button is every field, there's 19 different pieces of information involved in each contact. So it'd take me a long time to add those manually, but instead this has added all of them all at once into my study rules list to hide all of those details. All right. So that's the contacts section, a good example of a list that you fill in that's got a lot of different components to it. So moving on to the crop and the pest, let me go back to our slides here. Just a couple of notes. So for both the crop description and the pest description, we have a tool called Quick View. It's a little toolbar at the top of the screen. The idea here is just to make it easier to look at particular sets of fields. So one of the troubles, especially that crop description, just has a lot of different information all related to the crop. And so just in an effort to organize, we kind of organize the fields to be related ones or close to each other. We thought, well, let's take that one step further and actually make these automatic views, essentially. So that way I can really simplify what I'm looking at to match the one task I might be working on at the moment. So by just clicking on the variety, we'll hide all of the fields except the fields related to the variety details. Or in this case, on the screenshot, I've clicked on transplant, and then I've highlighted in blue. ARM doesn't highlight, but this is just to demonstrate these fields highlighted in blue are made visible by selecting transplant. And I also selected harvest to show that you can have more than one section on there. So maybe just going in ARM to see the difference. If I do all fields, you can just see how much information is here. And then especially if I have multiple varieties, so I have several crop sections, just very hard to look at and work with. So if I just clicking on one of these buttons, it immediately hides all of those other fields except ones we've tagged as related to treatment or related to planting. I can turn off the treatment and just select planting. And so these fields are all the ones related to the action of planting. So just trying to sync up with what am I doing today that I'm trying to document? Well, I'm just setting up the trial, or here in protocol wise, it's really, what am I going to plan? Maybe I know the variety details, probably not know many of those others. Let me jot down what we're planning to do for the different varieties in this experiment. And it's the same thing on the pest description. Not quite as many fields, but there are just a couple different categories. So the same idea of just simplifying the view. Do want to highlight a study rule kind of related to crops and pests that is pretty powerful. It's called limit validation list is the identifier if you were just adding it manually in the study rules editor. We did make this into a little simpler checkbox on the assessment data portion of the study rules editor. So I'll go to ARM to show that. So if I am in my study rules editor, then I can look at the rules related to assessment data. And we're talking about this one here on the right to limit the crop and pest list in the assessment editor to items that are selected in the site description. So the idea is just to create, to enforce a linkage between the assessments when I describe, well, what am I rating? Which pest am I rating? Which crop am I rating? It has to link to the specific crop or pest that I've defined in the site description. So this is a way to just really lock down and make sure that if there's some extra weed that appeared that we maybe didn't originally put in the protocol, I don't want it to show up only in the assessment editor. I need it actually documented in the pest description. I need an item there so that way all of my study rules for the details I need about every pest actually gets enforced. So when the trialist is creating an assessment or documenting an assessment, they aren't given the full list of all of the pests from Appl. They only see the list of in this case, the weeds that I've put in the pest description of the study. And like I said, if there was one not originally planned that they do have to document, that's fine. There's a button right here that says new, that they could add another one. And that just takes them right to the pest description, creates a new repeating section, so that way they can fill it in there. So really powerful tool for consistency. For just once you get the trial back, anything encountered in the crop or the pest within the assessment section has been documented in the pest description or crop description as well. And you can tell the trialists that it saves them time because now they don't have to go through the full list of the list from Appl, but now it's a much shorter list, easier to pick, right? And then last topic here on the crop description, just kind of a sneak peek of a function coming here in ARM 2025. We're kind of putting the finishing touches on the development, and within a few weeks here, coming in April, the 2025.1 update will be coming out, and one of the functions is related to the crop description. So you'll see this real soon. It's just a way to have your own pick list, your own list, just like we had before with a bunch of different information. Have a pick list kind of related to the variety. Pretty common maybe that you have variety information that you would want to document. that you'd use again and again, you can save this to a list now. So you'll see a button above the crop code itself, a button for the crop variety list. Same thing as before, fill in all of the details, describe that variety, whatever that information somewhat related to that variety that you might want to fill in and save. Fill that all in, and then click this button for the list, and ARM will ask you to add that to your list. So that'll be specific to the crop, just trying to make it easier if you're working with different varieties, to be able to save that information and use it in other studies. Okay, let's go back here. So that was the crop and the pest description. Moving along to maintenance, this section is all about non-treatment applications of products that go across the entire trial. So if it's it's fertilizer that has to be done, certain maintenance to just make sure you don't have unnecessary pests that you don't want as part of the study present, whatever it might be. Here, it's almost like a miniature treatments editor, but the idea here is, of course, it's not related to the experiment directly, at least not part of the treatment design there. So that's really what this is useful for, especially in a protocol. Maybe it'd be more about these rich text fields where you can describe what needs to be done. If there isn't a specific product, that's just telling the trialist to use, their local recommended practices, things like that. You can put those instructions in, and then the trialist maybe will fill in the maintenance details for what they've actually done. The soil tab, not a lot here in a protocol. If you did have a requirement for certain soil elements to be taken, you could put those in here, but not a whole lot in the protocol. Of course, a lot to document in the trial, but not much for planning's sake. All right, on the application section, we usually spend a lot of time here in the kind of the beginner training on just setting up applications. So I won't hammer those points home, but kind of a couple of topics here. The first one is just to point out another one of those multi-field lists, your equipment. So the your equipment type, all of the nozzle information, whatever you might need to document about the equipment used for an application, that is all linked to this equipment name. You can see there's a lot of different information depending on, of course, the different types of application equipment you might be using. So that's kind of a classic one there. It just goes all the way down to the bottom. All of these fields are all linked to equipment name, which is free text. So give that a name of whatever you might have, whatever you call it, or whatever the trialist calls it. That's all linked to the equipment name field there. Probably not super necessary in the protocol, but some of this information maybe you would fill in if it was part of the experiment of what would have to be done, part of the plan. Back to the slides. Couple of functions that might be useful. There's a function to copy your application column. So if you have multiple applications that kind of have the same plan, the same details, this is kind of a handy way to kind of automate any copy and pasting you might do. I think it's especially useful for the trialists. Try to hammer it home for the trialists. If you have the multiple application codes on the same day, there's just different equipment or some different process depending on which treatment. They're all on the same day, so a lot of the details ends up being the same. Good way to just save time and avoid any data entry mistakes if you just copy it across. I realize I don't have the, oh, here we go. It's on the next slide. It won't overwrite anything that's already there, which is nice. So anything that's already entered in one of the columns, it will not replace. So it's just a fill in whatever is there. And this will save me a little time, just a quick little video for what's happening. That's the way to initiate that. Just a little copy button up above an application code in the editor, and then it brings up that wizard and lets you say, okay, I've copied, in a way, I've kind of selected this entire application, everything I've filled in there. Where do I want to copy it to? So if I choose B and C, it'll show on the screen, that's what's going to get filled in. That's what's going to get copied. And in our case, in a protocol, it might just be, I've planned all this information, and then every application code kind of has the same plan. So let me just real quick fill all those details in. And you can even do that on some of the other sections related to the application. In a trial, you do have application and application equipment. Protocol, it's a little simpler. It's all kind of on the one screen. But then you just see that's all been combined together. A study rule that isn't specific to applications. The example here I'm using on the assessment editor, but it can go in a variety of places, would be what's called strict validation. So what that study rule does is it requires that when the information is filled in for that field, it does not allow free text. Even if the regular ARM, you can type in that field, you can customize and say, no, in this study, I need this piece of information chosen from the list. So if in this case, I put that onto the rating unit and the rating type. And so if you click into that field and start typing, the characters are not typed in, and instead that list appears. So here I try typing in the rating unit. Nope, no option. I'm not allowed to type. I have to pick something from the list that ARM provides. So I think especially for some of the site description details, very hard to summarize trials that are similar if everyone just freehand types information in, especially in fields that are really important. So, application method. If I just let someone type in, oh, well, I sprayed it. Well, that doesn't do me any good because everyone's going to type it in differently. I'm not going to be able to filter later on. So I need you to pick from ARM's list so that way I have that same vocabulary in all of my studies. So that's what strict validation will allow you to do is make sure specific fields are filled in, not from free text, but from the list. Real briefly, I won't spend much time on this last one, but just related to the application, since we're here, there is a dialog called the application plan. And it provides just kind of a different view. I kind of like just the fact that it brings together information from a lot of different sections in a protocol or trial, all on one screen. So it might be kind of handy. It was the core design was for leaf wall area types of experiments where there's lots of different pieces of information that get roped into that leaf wall area calculation. Things like your canopy height and how many rows are being applied that are in all over the place on different screens, bring them all together. So you end up with a really nice overview of your application codes, different settings about the plot size, the crop, the application details, and also your treatment list at the bottom. So kind of handy. It can pop up if you're creating a spray seeding plan. You can also bring it up just from the properties panel in ARM. There's a button to bring up the application plan. All right, moving along, a few more minutes left. Have a quick general comment for filling in a protocol that I'd like to point out, because we do like to encourage the more information you fill in a protocol that you know has several benefits. It's communication to the trialist. It also helps so that each trialist doesn't have to fill it in. And so this is an example. Lots of different areas in ARM. You have a value unit pair. So something like crop density or pest density I have on the screen here. Of course, there's the value, the numeric value you would record, and then there's the unit that you recorded in. From our perspective of writing a protocol, maybe I want to communicate what unit of measure I would like to use, or I would like the trialist to use. I would like my crop density to be recorded in square meters and pest density in percent, is the example here on my screen. And so originally, back in the day, ARM's validation would kick in and give us some grief to say, wait, you put in a unit, but you didn't put in a value. Clearly, you're missing something. Well, that's not great, especially in a protocol. It's like, that's not our purpose. We're not documenting anything yet. We're hoping just to communicate. So we got rid of those errors. It's been a few years now that this has been the case. But the whole purpose of getting rid of those validation messages is to open this up specifically just for value unit pairs like this that you might want to communicate a unit to use. So you can do that in the protocol, and ARM won't be immediately yelling at you that you didn't fill something in. If you do still want to make sure that ARM yells at the trialist that you need to fill this in, that's where a study rule would be handy. So then in this case, I'll fill in my units, and then I'll add a required study rule to both of those value fields. And that gives me control over the condition of when should this get filled in. Do I need to know it at, when the trial is marked as final? Maybe it should happen right when assessment data is filled in that column. I get to control the timing of when that should get filled. Okay, real quickly through the rest of these sections. Crop stage at application, pest stage at application, probably not a whole lot here for protocol planning. Again, certainly could do the unit. That would be where maybe it would matter if I did have a request to make sure that the trialists all put in the diameter in metric units instead of the US standard or something like that. I could communicate that. Besides that, not a whole lot for protocols. This equipment tab, relatively new. Same idea as the application equipment. We do have a list. So as you define different types of equipment, it can even be like your growth chamber, if you're working in a greenhouse study or things like that. Otherwise, probably more likely to be used by the trialist for their drones or the lights that are in their equipment, whatever it might be. All that information is tied to that name field. Treatment application comments. If you just want to have an additional comment linked to a particular treatment number. Notes is just read only. This is just used by ARM. If somebody signs a protocol or marks it as reviewed, those functions kind of get dumped into here as a log of when those things happen. Then we have site information and instructions are both tabs that just have various rich text fields. So very similar to the discussion on the objectives tab. You can copy paste information into these boxes. They can have formatting. Specifically here, it's nice that with the site details, there's different categories of what information to put in there. So you can be specific about some of the different aspects of the plan. You can put that in there. All of this information that you put here and in the instructions are copied to the trial, but they are read-only in the trial. So it's kind of nice. You have an official stamp, if you will, of what was the instructions from the protocol, that then the trialist doesn't change. They can certainly document what actually happened, but there's a record that is read only in that trial of what was the plan all along. Okay, last but not least, SE definitions. This section, we actually have a whole webinar on this. We could probably run a couple webinars on standard evaluations. So try to keep it real short and sweet because you can check out and learn how to use SEs and all of that in those other sessions. But just real briefly, this section is all about planning out your SEs or standard evaluations. Really, let's schedule out what assessments are going to happen in this experiment. And so you can create this schedule of the assessments. It's also a good way to have the trialist have the headers already. So they're going to use what you want the description to be for these assessments to really push forward the standardization of the trials that you're getting back. It'll make your summaries so much better, so much easier to create if all of the trials in this experiment all defined the yield the same way and all defined when they went out and did the pest incidents. They all described it the same way. It's so much easier then to summarize those trials. And there is a master list. So if you haven't created SEs before, kind of get a good kickstart. There's hundreds and hundreds of SEs in that list that you can use. You can go ahead and create a filter to try to find an SE that would be useful. There's a little preview on the screen so you can see what you're getting into, what you might want to select. So that's beneficial. And you can take it even one step farther and create a schedule of those assessments. So if you use rating timings, it's basically creating an application code for an assessment. And so you can schedule out if an assessment will be done several different times. In this case, there's 3 different times. I would go out and do that percent disease, and then the yield would be at the end. You can schedule those out and then use a function called build headers, and it will load those SEs on the assessment editor itself to kind of flesh out all of those columns. So again, kind of see our training on that on SEs to see that a little slower in action. I did have one question here as we wrap up with the site information. So yeah, that's kind of a common one with the rich text troubles, that sometimes if you have complex tables, like I said, mostly what I see is usually very long table might have problems fitting on the page, but most especially once you start merging cells. that seems to be when things just kind of go wrong when you're trying to then print a report. So just the background fact is when you paste information in here and it has the formatting, it has the tables, technically it's really saving code. This rich text code that the ARM will show you what that looks like, and it's got all that formatting. But internally it's saved as code of all of that text and how things are constructed. Then ARM has to take that and put it into a report, on the different pages, and then we take that report and send it to Word. And so now Word has to read that code, and you just get every so often the kind of goofy problems where things get lost in translation, if you will. And suddenly Word is unhappy because it can't figure out what that meant, or there's something in the code that colors everything white. So now you can't see anything on the page instead, or just kind of crazy things like that sometimes happen. And yeah, unfortunately, it's one of those. There's only so much we can do because it's more about the translation from the report into Word, and not a whole lot of what ARM can do. All we can do is reiterate what we've been given in the editor. So yeah, yeah, kind of one of those unfortunate ones that just keep popping up, but we don't have a good foolproof way to eliminate it. But okay, well, we made it through all of the sections, just maybe a minute or two long, but appreciate everyone joining today. We've got one more session next week for our March series, and then we will be scheduling more in April as well. So thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks very much for the session.
Thank you.
Bye.